All right, so we got Ranger factoring $500,000 receivables to First Factor Colorado. First Factor remits 90% of the receivables as cash, but withholds 10%. So one way you can kind of tackle these, because I know there's a lot of pieces going on here, you have the $500,000 of receivables up top. Now, of this value, so these are my accounts receivable, of this value, 490%, right? $450,000 are cash. 10% is withheld. We're not calling that our receivable yet, our receivable from factor, because remember, we have to assess a fair value about that piece. So that's 50,000. It also deducts the factor fee from the value of the withheld cash. So it's going to take its 3% factor fee from the 50,000. Remember, we're going to take 3% of the total amount of receivables that were sold. And so that becomes $15,000. Ranger Company assesses the fair market value of the 10% withheld to be 45,000. So this 45,000 is the fair value estimate. It doesn't believe that the 50,000 that was withheld will all come to the seller at the end of the transaction because it appears that it believes 5,000 of these receivables, 50,000 down to 45, 5,000 are going to be sales discounts and returns. And so overall, we're going to record a $30,000 receivable from factor. And how I got that is by the fair value estimate, less the factor fee that will for sure be taken out, right? Just those two pieces. So let's record this now. Take the $450,000 cash. That's what we received for selling our receivables. And we're going to credit the receivables that we sold. So then drop a few lines and record a credit to accounts receivable for 500,000. We determine the value of the receivable from factor. I'll just denote receivable REC period F from factor 30. So remember, cash, of course, is an asset. This is a receivable, also an asset. We gave up some assets to make this deal happen. And then, do we have a recourse obligation? It doesn't appear so. Nothing is said here about a recourse obligation. So these are the only facts of the transaction. So we could, as I mentioned, record our loss as a plug. We have $480,000 of debit, $500,000 of credit. The loss to balance would be 20,000. So that now we have $500,000 of debit to the credit. And then just so that we know what we're recording and not just plug it in a value, let's track where that loss on sale came from. So the $20,000 came from two places. The factor fee of 15,000. And remember, that was just the 3% on the 50,000 and the $500,000 receivables. The other 5,000 came from the fair value of receivables assessed by the seller. And how is that 5,000? Well, $50,000 was withheld when we were only paid for 50, but the seller decided that this withholding would not be returned in full. $5,000 would be lost after sales discounts and returns were taken off. So that's where the 5,000 comes from. Right. So a pretty complex transaction. You're not going to get it right away, but the more you actually talk out the entire process, what each piece consists of, what the loss consists of, what we're doing to determine the receivable from factor, it should make some more sense. It's not going to be the most intuitive transaction at first because it's a little bit of a specialized, complicated one, but this is that stretch and intermediate we want you to make to start thinking about more complex transactions, but apply some basic accounting intuition as you do it.